Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
This is my theory of everything. I have figured out how to give fringe science a scientific stand. Be careful, in order to unite morphic, fringe science, censorship, and politics, I really have to let it go. Poetry is greater than science. Imagination is greater than calculation. Russell Targ is greater than other physicists. Sheldrake is greater than other biologists. Have you heard about Morphic Resonance theory by Rupert Sheldrake? If you are familiar with Rupert Sheldrake and others like him, they believe in Morphic Resonance theory, which states when you do something, it is kind of stored in the spiritual level of the universe. He believes in telepathy. Other biologists believe in remote viewing and ESP stuff. He claims that people have a collective consciousness. Training lab rats in England will make rats in another part of the world smarter. There is no proof for the universe to be completely mechanical. The mechanical universe cannot have dark energy, which makes the universe still to be expanding. The universe might be an organism, purposeful. Morphic Resonance supporters also claim that prayer, meditation, and self-correction can make your heart bigger and make you a better conscious observer. It can make you a better telepath in the spiritual realm. Western mysticism, which Rupert Sheldrake is into, warns about having an ego. Every Eastern religion and philosophy tells people to be humble and emphasizes on the importance of mediation and prayer, widening your heart and thus empowering your spirit. Greg Braden is not really as reputed as Rupert, but he focuses on heart. He claims the heart is the source of consciousness. Human organ or blood donation can transfer the memory and character. He focuses on meditation and prayer to let the heart have its time. Russell Targ, a very prominent physicist, is an ESP researcher, and he was helping the CIA and military-industrial complex to remote view. Slightly off topic, Rupert is being persecuted. Since the 1980s, a particular group of neo-atheistic scientists have been, to put it lightly, screaming and bullying Rupert. Rupert has been defunded, but he had billionaire donors. Many other scientists in this field have been censored and defunded. The establishment scientists are quite corrupt, and they are trying to censor any theory that can reveal their true character. Google Brett and Eric. Brett Weinstein is a famous biologist who tried to publish research about the genes of lab mice. Mice have some characteristics that make them cancer-resistant. He factually proved that biologists are experimenting on special lab mice which have telomeres. This makes scientific methods not only undependable, but also dangerous. People probably suffered cell damage because of this bad methodology. Then the establishment scientists tried so hard to censor Brett Weinstein. A few years later, they semi-secretly changed the lab mice. However, they never apologized for bad methodology, nor did they ever apologize to Brett. To this day, Brett Weinstein is still being heavily censored by the establishment science and big pharma. Twitter recently decided to censor Brett and Eric Weinstein because they are trying to make a third party. However, I believe they are being censored because they are onto something elemental. Something will change our view on the Foundation. So, I think we have to rethink parapsychology and metaphysics. We need to create a metaphysical theorem, vague enough to explain our problems, but also definite enough to solve 100-years-old quantum mechanics. This theory of everything will have to inspire us to unite spiritually by figuring our inner problems. Is everything connected? Does the establishment depend on patents, big pharma, censorship, Wall Street military-industrial complex? Are these seemingly random incidents connected? Everything is connected into one, isn't it? Isn't that the definition of intelligence? Newton was a theologian, not a scientist. Einstein focused more on poetry and wanted his wife to do much of his math. Bohr was not a mathematician. He focused on imagination. Imagination is more important than calculation. Many scientists from Muslim Golden Age were either a theologian poet or atheistic philosopher. All Italian philosophers were serious scientists or astronomers. Eric Weinstein has said multiple times that if scientists think that the next theory of everything will be coming from somebody from the inside of the secular group, thinkers, they will be wrong. Eric focuses on poetry nowadays. Before I introduce my poetical theory of everything, let me set the premise first. If you know quantum mechanics, We don't know why particles will always form interference patterns when not observed. A particle going through a double-slit experiment will tell later particles how to form interference. This is a fact, not fiction. Small particles can see through time dimension, predict the future for a certain duration. Just Google it, Copenhagen. Many worlds, pilot wave interpretations. There are a lot. The duration it can see through time depends on the whole experiment. QM double-slit experiment depends on observation by a conscious entity. A simple observation by a computer can't really be fully trusted. You need a conscious observer, preferably a human. I'm talking about Copenhagen interpretation. If you know the delayed choice quantum eraser, you can force the particle to see the future thousands of years if necessary. However, even though particles can go back in time and give other particles information, we cannot transfer information in that way. Particles can share info, but the entanglement is unusable for us. Particles also have a low but non-zero chance to penetrate walls, if the wave function overlaps with the wall.
Now, let's go slightly macro. Massful particles cannot go 1 coulomb. When you spend energy on a particle, it wastes the energy into mass expansion instead of increasing speed. At low speed, nobody notices this, but the wastage happens exponentially. When you spend energy on an electron instead of being faster and faster, the electron will start wasting its energy on increasing mass at an exponential rate. You can spend near infinite energy on electrons, but it will never reach 1 coulomb. It's called Lorentz mass expansion. In order to become light speed, the particle has to be a completely massless particle, like photons and gluons. Now, it's time to introduce my self-correction wave theory of everything. It takes morphic resonance to a whole new level, as my views are way more radical than Sheldrake. Mass is ego. This is the reason why massful particles can't reach 1 coulomb. Only photons and gluons, massless, egoless particles, can reach 1 coulomb. Technically, it's because the rest mass and inertia increases exponentially, but in my theory, rest mass is ego. When you spend energy on an electron instead of being faster and faster, the electron will start wasting its energy on increasing mass at an exponential rate. But why? The right question is not how to travel faster than light. The right question is why. Is this purposeless? Or is there a reason for this? Is there any underlying message for humanity? Why does God limit us under light speed? What happens when you reach 1 coulomb? First of all, a particle needs to get rid of its ego and mass to reach 1 coulomb. And when a thing is 1 coulomb, time stops for it. It becomes a persistent thing. Time and space cannot be determined for it. A photon doesn't really have a sense of time by itself. It can almost choose space-time. Technically, it can't choose, but it can see a lot more info than the human mind can grasp. Once you reach 1 coulomb, once you reach light speed, you transcend through space-time. You reach heaven. If you let your ego go, you can go anywhere. Beat space-time. Mass is ego. Size is a kind of ego. Small particles have either zero mass or very low mass, and they are tiny. That means they are humble in their movement. They are self-correcting. In my theory, it's not like the particles want to be high speed and massful. Instead, they have a consciousness. These conscious particles want to be massless. They know the only way to reach light speed is to become massless and egoless. That's why they are self-correcting. Anyways, in the double-slit experiment, particles somehow know where the previous particles went. That's not an opinion, that's fact. That means previous particles are telling the later particles where they went. If you fire your electron gun every year, and take 300 years to fire 300 particles, they will still create an interference pattern in the double slit. The only way earlier particles can be used in order to give later particles path information has to be wave, self-correction wave. Copenhagen interpretation, which is still very popular among scientists, suggests reality is not absolute, and reality is our projection. Reality depends on observation, which matches with Eastern mysticism and poetical religions. Heart is the source of observation. Scientific facts indicate that humility, meditation, prayer, and self-correction can make your heart bigger and healthier. However, I have to warn you about the following paragraphs. My self-correction wave theorem also claims, and depends on, that a virus can spiritually connect through lab walls to the flea market virus, similar virus. My theory suggests that every species can be spiritually connected with the same species.
I will not elaborate this too much because moderators hate organ-spiritual connection, spiritual quantum tunnel, remote view, radical Russell-Targ theorem. However, I am obliged to state that Sheldrake and Greg Braden believe some of what I am about to say. Mass equals ego. Patent laws equals bad intent equals bad heart equals bad conscious observer. And in the double-slit experiment, a bad conscious observer is troubling. Human organs can send information through thick walls like telepathy or remote view. If you steal one of my lungs and your friend steals another, those will be connected spiritually. This connection strength depends on my self-correction, humility, prayer, and meditation. This is not really my theory. Greg Braden and many others have been doing research on quantum biology for decades. In my theory, the fourth dimension is time, but the fifth dimension is life. That's why biological organs can be connected or entangled, because of spirituality in living things. The smaller the organism, say virus, which is very, very small, the higher the potential to connect with the same species. How do many animals use quantum mechanics to their advantage? How did birds learn to use quantum biology in their brain to navigate? Why is the human brain using quantum mechanics on a massive scale? I believe only with spiritual unity we can defeat delusion, dilate the time dimension. Some biologists have suggested a spiritual version of evolution since the 1950s. It's possible that when some animal did something, they transferred the information spiritually or telepathically. Say pre-giraffe somehow found a way to grow taller neck, and somehow figured out the information. Then it's possible that it transferred the information through united self-correction wave. Continuous correction can be the causation of all creation. Every type of gene, a type, G-type, T-type, may have a spiritual antenna to connect with the same type in distance. Time for a little bit of conspiracy theory. Video linked below. The U.S. military-industrial complex might already have an infinite energy source. Inertial dampener equals infinite energy. I bet they achieved this with a self-correction wave. Maybe I am also wrong. Maybe those electric universe dubstep people got it right. They have conspiracy theories on their side. Nikola Tesla, the sun's construction, and the electromagnetic spectrum. Just because we hate the ultra-materialist doesn't mean we have to like the electric people. These images describe what I'm trying to say. A self-correction wave in a double-slit experiment. Self-correction in life. Defense against dark arts. That's self-correction. Poetry is greater than facts. There is a giant conspiracy by ultra-materialists who can't even explain dark matter and dark energy for 3 decades, which are 94% of everything. They care about string theory, which is a dead theory, prescribed in 1930 and published in 1970. No evidence or prediction found. The CIA actually wants ultra-materialists to have power so they can run their business and distract us from their infinite energy and inertial dampener. Some people said that pilot wave theory can explain some things like delayed choice quantum eraser. However, the theory has its problem. Firstly, pilot wave maintains reality by getting rid of locality. It introduces an ether-like thing, which contains all variable regarding everything. This universal medium of information can be equivalent to, wait for it, morphic field / Sheldrake-ish. Sheldrake's morphic field is that every data is stored in a morphic field. So when somebody does something, it is stored in a spiritual field as an information. This is by definition a pilot wave because in Bohmian mechanics there is a spiritual wave, which is mysteriously invisible from the final result, but controls the particle in the middle of the experiment, etc. Pilot wave clearly claims that even though entangled information is stored in a universal field, only particles can access this information. In a delayed choice quantum eraser, we cannot use particles' entangled information to send any info back into the past. But particles can use the universal pilot field's information for themselves. Also, famous papers like Xiaosong Ma 2012 and Genuine 2005 have shown that a conscious observer, human, is a big factor, not only measurement devices like Bohmian mechanics supporters like to suggest. I don't believe in pilot wave even though the similarity. These are 100-year-old theories that need lots of renovation. Hell, I don't even agree with Sheldrake. My view is far more radical.
Rupert Sheldrake has developed a working model of the 100th monkey phenomenon. The 100th monkey effect is a hypothetical phenomenon in which a new behavior or idea is spread rapidly by unexplained means from one group to all related groups once a critical number of members of one group exhibit the new behavior or acknowledge the new idea. The behavior was said to propagate even to groups that are physically separated and have no apparent means of communicating with each other. Morphic resonance is a process whereby self-organizing systems inherit a memory from previous similar systems. In its most general formulation, morphic resonance means that the so-called laws of nature are more like habits. The hypothesis of morphic resonance also leads to a radically new interpretation of memory storage in the brain and of biological inheritance. Memory need not be stored in material traces inside brains, which are more like TV receivers than video recorders, tuning into influences from the past. Thus, each individual inherits a collective memory from past members of the species, and also contributes to the collective memory, affecting other members of the species in the future. Have you ever experienced the phenomenon when talking to a group of friends and you all say the same thing or derive to the same conclusion at the exact same time? How do swarms of insects, fish, and birds navigate their travels and keep the solidity of the egregore asynchronously?
The idea of reincarnation is that your soul has no concept of intelligence or knowledge. It's just your base character. It evolves and learns, but each time it exists as purely a soul, it loses any and all information gained in life, and just has an impression of the experience remaining. The result being that when it reincarnates, it doesn't actually have a clue what it's getting into. That said, that's not what a soul is. The soul is the connection between your various selves across the multiverse. All that shit, good and bad, happens, and when you screw up badly enough to die or suffer extreme emotion, that ripples out to the other selves so they screw up less often. Similar to why we will never have true AI built with transistors. We don't currently have the tech to make souls because it's bound by conformational similarity leading to morphic resonance, which is to say that the physical structure from shape of neurons to connections to chemical gradients change with every single thought. And time itself doesn't really exist. It's just a sorting algorithm. You could sooner make conscious AI with a bunch of lobster ganglia in a vat than you ever could with transistors. Even if you converted all the matter in the visible universe to transistors, it wouldn't match a thimble full of brain across the multiverse when accounting for divergence and convergence events.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.